They say drowning is peaceful. They lied. 3 United States Marines held Corporal Mackenzie Sawyer 30 feet underwater in a training pool at Camp Pendleton, California. June 17, 2025. 112 degrees. The daughter of a fallen hero was dying while her brothers watched. Her lungs burned like white phosphorus, vision tunneling to nothing. 3 sets of hands, strong as steel cable, pressed her down with military precision. Coordinated, deliberate. This was not panic. This was execution disguised as training. Captain Daniel Sawyer, her father, had won the Silver Star and Navy Cross. Killed in action, Fallujah, 2011. He died shielding 3 Marines from an IED. Those men lived because he chose to die. Now his daughter drowned in California. 14 years later, same Corps, different war, same question. Who protects the protectors? 300 yards away, Lieutenant General Marcus Briggs watched through Steiner military binoculars. $3,000 optics that resolved human faces at half a mile. He saw everything. 3 men holding 1 woman underwater. Coordinated murder masked as rescue. The exact moment she stopped fighting. General Briggs was 62 years old. First kill in Vietnam at 19. 87 confirmed kills across 3 wars. Navy Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 3 Purple Hearts. 4 decades learning when violence was necessary and when it was evil. This was evil. His hand dropped the binoculars, grabbed the radio. His voice, amplified through every speaker on base, carried the authority of God judging sinners. All personnel cease activity immediately. Release Corporal Sawyer or I will consider it murder. Master-at-Arms, secure Staff Sergeant Brennan, Corporal Stone, and Lance Corporal Carver. This is General Briggs. Anyone who moves without permission joins them in the brig. The hands released. Instantly. The way Marines obey generals who are not asking, but commanding. Mackenzie floated up like a corpse. 30 feet, 20, 10, pure survival instinct. Ancient brainstem taking over. She broke surface, gasped, coughed water and blood and death. California's sun blazed like an angry god. Air tasted like gasoline and chlorine and life. 60 seconds. That was how long General Marcus Briggs took to destroy 3 careers, keep a promise to a dead friend, and prove that some debts must be honored even when they cannot be repaid. But the story began earlier, in the mud and blood of Fallujah, with a young captain who saw death coming and stepped in front of it, with a promise whispered over a dying man. Began 14 years ago when everything was still possible. 72 hours earlier, the transport bus rolled through Camp Pendleton's main gate at 0700 hours. Tuesday morning, June heat building toward triple digits, the kind that turned uniforms into sweat rags and made breathing feel like inhaling fire. Corporal Mackenzie Sawyer stepped off last. Deliberate. Never be first, never be obvious. Move like smoke. Her father taught her that when he was alive and teaching her things. 24 years old, son now 5'7", 138 pounds of muscle and scar tissue and controlled rage. Haircut regulation short. Eyes gray like winter fog. Face showing nothing. That look had a name. The 1,000-yard stare. Someone who had seen things and carried them quietly. Mackenzie earned it the day they handed her mother the folded flag and told her that her father died a hero. She did not want a hero, she wanted a father. Everything she owned fit in a rucksack and rifle case. The rifle was custom. Remington 700 action, Macmillan stock, Night Force optics. Built over 3 years, 10,000 rounds through it. She knew every click, every wind drift. Her father had been a sniper, 217 confirmed kills, 3 deployments. He taught her to shoot at 8, taught her to breathe between heartbeats, taught her that shooting was not about triggers, but about becoming the rifle, disappearing into the scope. He died when she was 10. She kept shooting, because shooting was their only conversation now. The barracks smelled like every military barracks in history. Sweat, boot polish, young men in close quarters. Mackenzie claimed a corner bunk. Always the corner, always see the door. Old habits from military bases where violence was 3 seconds away if you were not paying attention. A woman appeared. Private Jade Ellis. Blonde, 21. Nervous energy. She smiled too much. "Hey, I'm Jade. Looks like we're bunkmates." Mackenzie nodded. Did not smile, did not engage, not here for friends. "You nervous about training?" "Not particularly." The deflection came automatic. Marines did not reveal weakness. but her hands trembled as she unpacked. Just slightly, just enough she had to make fists to stop them. The door opened. Conversation died. Every Marine came to attention. Staff Sergeant Colt Brennan entered like he owned the place. 32, 6'2", 215, Bronze Star from Afghanistan. 2 combat tours, 3 years drill instructor. Physical presence that made junior Marines step aside automatically. Eyes like a reptile. Cold. Calculating. Hungry. Those eyes found Mackenzie, held her gaze, assessed her like equipment. Corporal Sawyer, voice like Texas gravel. Heard you graduated top of sniper school. Yes, Staff Sergeant. Your father was Daniel Sawyer. The Daniel Sawyer. Silver Star. Navy Cross. 217 confirmed kills. Yes, Staff Sergeant. A legend. One of the greatest snipers the Corps ever produced. Big boots to fill. Mackenzie said nothing. 14 years trying to fill boots too big, too heavy, too soaked in blood. You think women belong in infantry? The question was not curiosity, it was a test. I think anyone who can do the job belongs, Staff Sergeant. Brennan smiled. Smile did not reach his eyes. We'll see about that. He left. Door closed. 10 seconds of silence. Then conversation resumed. Quieter. More careful. A man approached. Corporal Nathan Rivera, 27, Force Recon, moved like water, smooth, efficient, dangerous the way competent people are dangerous. He looked at her rifle case. Custom 308? Yes. Build it yourself? Over 3 years. You any good? I don't miss. Rivera nodded. Recognition between professionals. Good. You'll need that here. Why? Brennan doesn't like being second best. You're about to make him look second best. I just want to do my job. Your job just made you a target. Watch your back, Sawyer. That night, 200 miles north of Quantico, 2 old men sat in a room that smelled like bourbon and cigar smoke, and 50 years of shared history. Lieutenant General Marcus Briggs poured 3 fingers of Blanton's into a glass that belonged to his dead wife. Cancer took her 5 years ago. He still used her glass, still set a place for her at dinner sometimes, still woke reaching for her in the night. Sergeant Major Jack Kane entered without knocking. 43 years of friendship bought that privilege. Vietnam together in 71. Gulf War in 91. Iraq in 03. Killed men together. Buried Marines together. Got drunk on every continent where America sent warriors. Kane was 58, Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts, face like granite, hands like wrecking balls. Could still do 50 pull-ups. Run 3 miles under 20 minutes. Take apart an M2 blindfolded. Drink most men under the table. He carried his own glass and cigar. Sat without invitation. Poured 4 fingers because he was not a general and did not pretend to have discipline. Heard Daniel Sawyer's kid is at Pendleton. Briggs nodded, stared into bourbon like it held answers. Mackenzie, goes by Mac. You gonna go easy on her? Hell no. Daniel would want her treated like every other Marine. No favoritism, no special treatment, just honest evaluation. Kane lit his cigar. Smoke made lazy circles in lamplight. You also gonna let them kill her? The question hung heavy, dangerous, impossible to ignore. What are you talking about? Women in combat billets get targeted. Harassment turns to assault, turns to murder, if nobody stops it. You owe Daniel Sawyer your life 3 times over. His daughter's walking into a unit that might not want her there. Briggs drank, let bourbon burn his throat, settle like napalm in his stomach. She needs to earn her place, same as everyone. Agreed, but she needs to survive long enough to earn it. You remember Sarah Fletcher? The name hit like incoming artillery. Sarah Fletcher, 19, Marine recruit, daughter of Captain Gerald Fletcher. Reported harassment at Lejeune in 2019. Told to handle it herself. Be tough. Prove she belonged. Found hanging in barracks 3 weeks later. Dead at 19 because the system failed her. I remember. Fletcher's at Pendleton now. Training command, same unit where Sawyer's assigned. Jesus Christ. He's a drunk war dog. Broken. Carrying his daughter's death like a rucksack full of rocks. Think he'll protect Sawyer when he couldn't protect his own kid? What do you want me to do, Jack? Honor the promise you made to Daniel. Make sure his daughter doesn't end up like Sarah Fletcher. Be there when it matters. Briggs stood, walked to the window. Virginia night coming down like artillery. Stars appearing one by one. Same stars that watched him kill his first man in Vietnam. Same stars that watched Daniel Sawyer die in Iraq. I'm scheduled for inspection next week. Pendleton. Routine? Briggs turned. Face looked carved from stone. like a man carrying 40 years of dead Marines. No such thing as routine when you owe a blood debt. Kane raised his glass. To Daniel Sawyer, saved your ass 3 times, never asked for anything. To Daniel, Briggs drank, and to keeping promises to dead men. They drank in silence. 2 old warriors, Vietnam vets, men who learned in Southeast Asian jungles that some promises were sacred. Some debts could never be repaid but must be honored anyway. Brotherhood was all that mattered when everything else burned. Outside, stars watched, silent, distant, uncaring. Same stars that would watch Mackenzie Sawyer fight for her life in 72 hours. The rifle range opened at 0600, 50 recruits, 5 distances, 250 possible points. Most Marines scored 190 to 220. Exceptional shooters broke 230. Mackenzie Sawyer fired her last round at 0745. Staff Sergeant Diana Reeves, range master and former Olympic shooting alternate, walked down range to score targets. Perfect score, 250 out of 250, every round center mass from 100 to 500 yards. In 110-degree heat with 15-mile-per-hour gusts. Reeves ran this range 8 years, seen thousands of Marines shoot, maybe a dozen perfect scores. None this young, none this small, none from a woman. She walked back, checked the score sheet twice, announced results. Corporal Sawyer, 250, perfect score. Range went quiet, 50 Marines processing what they heard. Then applause. Scattered at first. Building. Marines respected competence even when it made them uncomfortable. Staff Sergeant Brennan fired his last round at 0800. Reeves scored his target, 242, 8 points behind Sawyer, second place out of 50. Brennan's face showed nothing, but his hands clenched white on the pistol grip as he cleared his weapon. His eyes tracked Mackenzie across the range, burned with something that looked like hatred masked as professional assessment. Rivera appeared at Mackenzie's elbow, voice quiet, for her ears only. You just made an enemy. I just did my job. Your job just made you a target. Brennan's father is Colonel William Brennan, 2-star general, Pentagon connections. His son spent his life trying to live up to that legacy and failing. You beat him in front of 50 Marines, he won't forget. What am I supposed to do, miss on purpose? No, but watch your back. Brennan's not the type to let this go. That night in Brennan's quarters, 3 men sat in darkness and planned murder without calling it murder. Colt Brennan, Lance Corporal Jesse Carver, Corporal Elijah Stone. Jesse was 21, West Virginia, coal miner's son, joined Marines to escape poverty, found purpose, worshipped Brennan like young men worship father figures, blindly, completely, dangerously. Elijah was 28, Pennsylvania, foster care and abuse, smart like sociopaths are smart, cold like predators are cold. Learned early that power was all that mattered. Marines gave him power. She outshot everyone. Jesse's voice carried awe. So what? Elijah's voice was flat. Dead. Range scores don't mean combat effectiveness. Brennan stared at the bronze star on his wall. Earned in Helmand Province. Contact with Taliban. He performed adequately. Followed orders. Did his job. Nothing heroic. Nothing legendary. Nothing that would make his father proud. His father called that afternoon. Brief, formal, cold. How's training, son? Good, sir. Performing well. Are you top of your class? Yes, sir. Good. Brennan's don't come in second. Except now he was second. Second to a woman half his size. Second to a legend's daughter he would never equal. Second to someone who made him look ordinary. She needs to understand that infantry is different from sniper school. Physical, brutal, not a place for women. What are you saying, Gunny? Jesse's voice held uncertainty. Accidents happen during training. Ropes break, equipment fails, people get hurt. Silence. The kind where lines are crossed and souls are compromised and there is no way back. How hurt? Elijah asked. No judgment, no morality, just cold calculation. Hurt enough to quit, hurt enough to transfer, hurt enough to understand some traditions are worth protecting. You want us to target her? I want us to test her, see if she's as tough as her father, see if she belongs, or if she's just riding his legacy. And if she doesn't quit, Brennan looked at his followers, saw Jesse's worship and Elijah's coldness, knew he had them, knew they would follow anywhere, do anything. That was what young Marines did for staff sergeants they respected. Then we escalate until she does. The Crucible obstacle course opened at 0600 Thursday. 30 obstacles over 2 miles. Full combat load, 60-pound rucks, body armor, weapons, everything Marines carried in combat. Mackenzie led the pack through the first mile. Brutal pace, perfect form, moved through obstacles like water downhill. Efficient, unstoppable. Cargo net climb was obstacle 17. 30 feet of braided nylon between two platforms. Standard issue, inspected weekly, rated for 800 pounds dynamic load. Mackenzie was 15 feet up when the rope snapped. Sound like a rifle shot. Sharp, clean, final. Rope separated as if cut with a blade. Not frayed. Cut. Mackenzie fell 15 feet, landed on her left ankle. Pain instant and overwhelming. White hot, blinding, tasted copper, bit through her tongue. She did not scream. She rolled to her feet. Tested ankle, sprained, maybe fractured, compromised, but mobile. 10 yards away, Jesse Carver stood with his right hand behind his back. Something metallic in his palm. Looked like a folding knife. Should not have been there during training. Rivera reached Mackenzie first, examined the rope, cut was surgical, clean as a scalpel, deliberate. This was sabotage. Voice carried across the course, loud enough for everyone, loud enough for Staff Sergeant Brennan as he jogged over. That's a serious accusation, Corporal. It's the truth, Gunny. Rivera pointed at the rope. This wasn't frayed, this was cut. Brennan examined the rope. Face showed nothing. You got proof? The rope's right there. Ropes fray. Equipment fails. Training is dangerous. Rivera's hands clenched into fists. This wasn't frayed. This was cut. You got a witness? Silence. Jesse had melted into the group. Knife, if it existed, was gone. Brennan's eyes met Rivera's, carried a warning clear as rifle fire. Watch yourself, Corporal. False accusations are serious offenses. Mackenzie taped her ankle with field dressing every Marine learned in boot camp. Compression, support, ignore the pain. Finish the course limping. 47 minutes. Third fastest time. Brennan finished first, 43 minutes. 300 yards away, on an observation platform, General Briggs watched through binoculars. Sergeant Major Kane stood beside him. Tough kid, just like her father. Something's wrong here, War Dog. I can feel it. So can I. You gonna do something? Briggs lowered binoculars. Face showed nothing. Eyes, pale blue and cold as Arctic ice, burned with something that might have been anger or calculation. Not yet, but soon. That night, Mackenzie sat alone cleaning her rifle. M4 was an extension of her body, knew every part, every function, every way it could fail, maintained it with obsessive precision. Equipment failure meant death. Photo in her locker showed a man in dress blues, Captain Daniel Sawyer, her father, dead 14 years. She was 8 at his funeral, stood next to her mother in a black dress too hot for California sun. Watched them fold the flag with mechanical precision. A 2-star general handed her mother the flag. Major Marcus Briggs, he knelt in front of 8-year-old Mackenzie, spoke words she barely remembered. Your daddy was the bravest man I knew. Did you kill the people who killed him? 8 years old and already understanding that death required payment. Yes, good. 14 years later, that same general was somewhere on this base. Mackenzie did not know why. Did not know he requested this inspection specifically. Did not know every move she made was being watched by someone who promised her father he would keep her safe. She knew only that she was alone. The Corps was not the family her father promised. Men around her were not brothers, but threats. She cleaned her rifle until it gleamed, until every part moved with oiled precision, until it was perfect. Then she pulled out her father's combat knife, 7 inches of carbon steel. He carried it through 2 Iraq tours, used it to save lives and take them. Given to Briggs to give to Mackenzie after his death. She tested the edge against her thumb, drew a thin line of blood. Knife was still sharp after all these years. Maybe she would need it. In his quarters, Brennan stared at his bronze star and thought about inadequacy, about living in a father's shadow, about being second best to a woman half his size. His father's voice echoed. Brennan's don't come in second. Elijah sat in the corner, cleaning his own knife, making it sharp, making it ready. Jesse sat on his bunk, head in hands, trying not to think about the rope he cut. How close Mackenzie came to breaking her neck. What came next? Because there was always a next, always escalation. That was how these things worked. Pool training was scheduled for next week. 3 days later, the live fire exercise happened. Squad tactics, moving through simulated urban environment. Live ammunition, real danger. Training that separated those who performed under pressure from those who froze when bullets started flying. Mackenzie's squad moved like water, smooth, coordinated. She cleared corners with textbook precision, called targets with clinical accuracy, put rounds on target with consistency that came from talent and training and genetic gifts from a legendary father. The round that almost killed her came from behind, impacted concrete walls 6 inches from her head. Chips of masonry exploded. Close enough she felt concussion. Close enough that if she had been standing slightly different, slightly more exposed, the round would have taken the back of her skull off. She spun, weapon up, finger on trigger, ready to return fire. "Who the fuck fired that?" Rivera's voice carried across the course. Loud, furious, dangerous. Brennan appeared from cover. Voice calm, professional. Someone who expected this. "Carver, you drifted off target." Jesse stood frozen. Rifle still pointed where he fired. Face white as bone. "I'm sorry, Gunny. Mackenzie walked across the course. Moved slowly, deliberately, like a predator approaching wounded prey. Stopped 6 inches from Jesse's face. "Next time you miss, I'll assume it's on purpose." Eyes meeting his carried a promise. Not a threat. A promise. "If you try to kill me again, I will make sure you regret it." Jesse could not hold her gaze. Looked away. Looked down. Anywhere but at gray eyes that seemed to see straight through him. "Stand down, Corporal." Brennan's voice carried command weight. "Back to your position." Mackenzie did not move immediately. Held Jesse's gaze 3 more heartbeats, making sure he understood, making sure he knew. Then she returned to position, checked weapon, continued the exercise. But something changed. Lines were drawn, positions established. Everyone on that range knew this was not training anymore. This was war. That afternoon, Captain Gerald Fletcher sat in his office with a half-empty whiskey bottle in his desk drawer and the weight of dead daughters on his conscience. 45 years old, 22 years in the Corps, decorated officer, exemplary record, completely, utterly broken. Photo on his desk showed a teenage girl in Marine dress blues. Private Sarah Fletcher, his daughter, 19 when she died. Suicide, hanging in barracks at Camp Lejeune, 2019. She reported harassment, went through proper channels, did everything right. Her father, deployed to Afghanistan, told her over scratchy satellite phone to handle it herself. Be tough, prove she belonged. 3 weeks later, she was dead. The suicide note was in his desk drawer. Next to the whiskey, he read it sometimes when drunk enough that words could not hurt anymore. "Dad, I reported it. You told me to handle it myself. I couldn't. I'm sorry, I wasn't strong enough." The knock on his door made him close the drawer, hide the whiskey, compose his face into something professional. Enter. Corporal Mackenzie Sawyer stood in the doorway, rigid attention, eyes forward, perfect picture of a Marine seeking audience with her commander. "Sir, I need to report a pattern of harassment and potential attempts on my life." Fletcher felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not again. Not this. Not now when he was barely holding together. "Sit down, Corporal." She sat. Outlined incidents. Rope cutting, live fire near miss, escalating pattern of targeting. Spoke clinically, precisely, like someone building a legal case rather than expressing fear. Fletcher listened, heard the words, recognized the pattern, heard it before from Sarah. Every word, every detail, same story with different names. "Do you have proof?" The question was automatic. Same question he asked Sarah, same question that got his daughter killed. Corporal Rivera witnessed the rope. Others saw, witnessed a rope breaking, equipment fails during training. "Do you have proof of deliberate sabotage?" "Sir, this is attempted murder." That's a serious accusation without concrete evidence. Words came out like they belonged to someone else, like reading a script written by his own failures. He watched Mackenzie's face harden, watched hope die in her eyes. Marines are rough with each other, our culture, our way of testing readiness. If I launched investigations every time someone claimed harassment, "Sir, prove you can handle the pressure, Corporal. Show me you belong here. Then we'll talk about investigations." She stood, saluted, left without another word. Fletcher waited until the door closed, then opened the drawer, pulled out whiskey, pulled out Sarah's suicide note, pulled out the loaded pistol he kept for the day when he finally found courage to join his daughter. 3 objects: whiskey, note, gun, the trinity of his existence. He chose the whiskey, always the whiskey, never the gun. That evening in General Briggs' temporary quarters at Camp Pendleton, two old warriors sat with bourbon and cigars and the weight of difficult conversations. "You need to do something about Sawyer," Kane said. "What about her?" "She went to Fletcher." He shut her down. Briggs said nothing, stared into bourbon like it held answers. Like amber liquid could tell him how to balance the promise made to a dead friend with requirements of military protocol. "Fletcher's a good officer. Fletcher's a drunk who lost his daughter." The words hit like incoming fire. Briggs looked up sharply. "What?" Kane told the story. Sarah Fletcher, harassment, suicide. Father too far away and too committed to toughness to save his daughter. Now he's got Daniel Sawyer's kid reporting the same pattern, doing the same thing that got Sarah killed. Looking away. "Jesus Christ. You owe Daniel, you owe her." Briggs stood, walked it to window. Outside, California night coming down like artillery. Stars appearing one by one. Same stars that looked down on Fallujah in 2011. Same stars that watched Daniel Sawyer die protecting 3 Marines who lived because he did not. "If I intervene, it looks like favoritism. If you don't, she might end up like Sarah Fletcher." "What do you want me to do, Jack?" "Be there. Watch. When the moment comes, act." Briggs turned from window, determination hardening in his expression. "I've been watching for 2 weeks, tracking reports, observing patterns. I scheduled this inspection specifically because I suspected escalation. Pool training is when they'll make their move." Kane studied his friend. "So this wasn't coincidence." "There's no such thing as coincidence when you're hunting predators. Daniel taught me that in Fallujah. I've been applying those lessons to his daughter's situation. You've been 3 steps ahead this whole time, just like Daniel would have been. I owe him that much." The conspiracy formed like a tumor, slow, malignant, inevitable. 3 men in a barracks room, lamp turned low, voices quiet, planning something that crossed the line from harassment into murder. "Pool training is next week," Brennan said. Voice was different now, harder, colder. Someone who made a decision and would not be talked out of it. "Water's dangerous," Elijah said. "Accidents happen." Jesse said nothing. Sat on his bunk, hands clasped between knees. Looked sick. Someone who knew exactly where this was going and lacked courage to stop it. "What are you saying?" Finally, voice barely a whisper. "We teach her a lesson she won't forget." "You mean—" Brennan turned to look at him, eyes in lamplight flat and cold and utterly committed. "We make her understand that some spaces aren't meant for women. Some traditions are worth protecting. Some lines should never be crossed." That's what?" Elijah's voice sharp. "Dangerous. Having second thoughts, Carver?" "No, you just what?" "I just want to know how far we're taking this." Silence that followed was answer enough. Jesse felt something cold settle in his gut. Looked at Brennan, at Elijah, at 2 men who became his friends and mentors and were now becoming something else entirely. He should have said no, should have refused, should have walked out and reported everything. But he did not. 21 years old and desperate for approval, worshiped Brennan like young men worship heroes, was weak in all the ways that mattered. "I'm in." 2 words. The conspiracy became real. In her barracks bunk, Mackenzie Sawyer dreamed of drowning. Underwater. Pool at Camp Pendleton. But also the ocean. But also somewhere else. Somewhere dark and cold where hands reached up from depths and pulled her down. Her father's face floated in the water. Not dead, not alive. Just watching. Judging. Finding her wanting. "The core is family." His voice was bubbles and salt water. "Trust them." But when she reached for him, he dissolved into foam. Hands kept pulling, kept dragging her deeper, kept holding her under until her lungs burned and vision tunneled and the world went black. She woke gasping, covered in sweat, heart hammering like automatic weapons fire. Just a dream. Just her subconscious processing fear and stress and bone-deep knowledge that something terrible was coming. She checked her watch. 0300. 3 hours until morning formation. She did not go back to sleep. Pulled out her father's combat knife, tested the edge, made sure it was sharp. "When you are afraid," her father told her once, "make yourself more dangerous than the thing you fear." She intended to be very dangerous indeed. The morning of pool training arrived with California sun and desert heat and the weight of inevitability. Mackenzie geared up with mechanical precision. Combat utilities, boots laced tight, weighted pack secured, felt the weight, tested straps. Everything seemed to regulation. She did not know Corporal Elijah Stone added 20 extra pounds of steel plates while she slept. Did not know the pack marked with her name would drag her down faster and deeper than any others. She did not know because she had no reason to suspect. Because despite everything, some part of her still believed Marines took care of Marines. The Corps was family. Her father's promise had been true. She would learn differently soon enough. Rivera found her before formation, face tight, worried, someone who knew something bad was about to happen but could not prove it enough to stop it. Watch yourself today, Sawyer. Always do. I mean it. Something feels wrong. What kind of wrong? Rivera glanced around, made sure no one listened, leaned in close. I think Brennan's planning something. I think today's the day. You got proof? Just a feeling. Mackenzie nodded. Marines learn to trust feelings, learn to recognize the prickle at the back of the neck that said danger was coming. Learn to distinguish paranoia from genuine threat assessment. I'll be ready. But ready was not going to be enough. 300 yards away, a helicopter landed at Camp Pendleton. Rotor wash kicked up dust and memories. The man who stepped out wore a lieutenant general's uniform, 2 stars on collar, 40 years of service ribbons on chest, face that carried the weight of promises made to dead friends. Sergeant Major Kane stepped out behind him. 2 old warriors, Vietnam vets, men who'd seen enough death to recognize when more was coming. You really think something's going to happen? Kane asked. General Marcus Briggs adjusted binoculars on their strap, checked the radio on his belt, made sure his sidearm was loaded. I've been tracking their pattern for 2 weeks. Escalation follows a predictable trajectory. Pool training provides the perfect scenario. Deep water, plausible deniability. Today's the day they make their move. What if you're wrong? Then I wasted a trip. But I'm not wrong. I know predators when I see them. Daniel taught me how to hunt them. They walked across base toward pool facility. Briggs moved with controlled precision of a man who spent 40 years in combat zones. Every step deliberate, every sense alert. Reading terrain and threat assessment like other men read newspapers. The observation tower overlooked the pool from 300 yards. Perfect vantage point. Perfect field of fire, if it came to that. Briggs climbed stairs with Kane following. At the top, he raised binoculars and began scanning the pool area. 15 recruits in formation. Petty Officer Barnes briefing them on exercise. Standard combat water survival. Swim with full pack. Partner rescue drills. Basic stuff every Marine learned. Except Briggs knew it was not going to be basic. He found Mackenzie in formation. Smaller than most men around her, but holding herself with rigid discipline that said she belonged despite her size. Daniel's daughter, Daniel's legacy, Daniel's ghost made flesh. Briggs felt something twist in his chest. Combination of grief and guilt and fury so cold it felt like ice in his veins. I made you a promise, Daniel, whispered to the dead. I intend to keep it. At the pool, Elijah Stone handed Mackenzie her pack. Their eyes met for just a moment. Stone's face showed nothing, but something in his eyes made Mackenzie's instincts scream. This is heavy. Regulation weight, Corporal. She wanted to argue, demand a different pack, trust her instincts that said this was wrong. But she secured the pack to her shoulders, felt abnormal weight settle across her back, ignored the voice in her head that said, danger, danger, danger. Jesse Carver stood in formation 3 spots behind her, face white, hands shaking. Looked like someone standing on gallows waiting for trapdoor to open. 10 yards away, Rivera keyed his radio, tried to call for help, tried to warn someone that something terrible was about to happen. Channel was blocked. Training in progress. No unauthorized communications. He looked up at observation tower 300 yards away, saw 2 figures standing there, saw binoculars reflecting sunlight. He prayed they were watching, prayed someone with power and authority was paying attention, because if they were not, Mackenzie Sawyer was going to die. Brennan entered pool area, moved with confidence of someone executing a plan, someone who thought through every detail, someone who believed he was protecting something sacred. He caught Elijah's eye, got a tiny nod that said everything was ready, caught Jesse's eye, saw fear there but also commitment, weakness that could be exploited. He did not catch Rivera's eye, did not see the warning there, did not know his entire plan was being watched by someone who had killed men for less. All recruits in the water. Petty Officer Barnes called. Standard procedure, full pack, 50-meter swim. Let's move. Mackenzie moved to pool edge. Water looked black under California sun. Deep, cold, filled with chlorine and ghosts of every Marine who drowned in training over decades. She remembered her dream, hands pulling her down, father dissolving into foam, darkness at the bottom where things with teeth waited. Just a dream, just fear manifesting. But fear, she learned, was often prophecy. She jumped. Cold hit like a fist to the chest. Pack dragged her down immediately. Too heavy, too fast, she kicked hard. Fought for surface, broke through gasping. Around her, other recruits surfaced. Some struggling, some confident, all focused on the swim ahead. None knowing that in the next 5 minutes, everything would change. 300 yards away, General Briggs watched through binoculars, watched Mackenzie struggle more than the others, watched her fight the pack, watched her determination override her body's distress signals. Something's wrong. Kane moved beside him, raised his own binoculars. What? Her pack. It's too heavy. Look how she's sitting in the water compared to others. They watched. Both combat vets with decades of experience reading situations, both feeling the same prickle of warning. Mackenzie fought forward. Meter by meter, stroke by stroke, Pack felt like an anchor, like something actively trying to pull her down. She pushed through. Marines endured. Marines overcame. She reached the 25-meter mark. Halfway. Lungs burned, shoulders screamed, legs felt like lead. Behind her, Jesse Carver followed. Face set, mind made. He was committed now. Too late to back out. Too late to do the right thing. Brennan entered the water behind them both, moving with purpose, moving with intent, moving like a man about to commit murder and call it training. In the observation tower, General Briggs felt his blood turn to ice. Oh God, they're gonna kill her. His hand moved to the radio on his belt. Other hand moved to sidearm at his hip. 40 years of training and instinct took over. Threat assessment, target acquisition, rules of engagement. He was 300 yards away, too far to intervene physically, but not too far to command, not too far to stop this before it became irreversible. Partner rescue drill, Petty Officer Barnes called from pool edge. Carver, you're with Sawyer. Jesse swam toward Mackenzie. She saw him coming, saw something in his face that made every instinct scream. But she was trained to trust fellow Marines, trained to believe that when you were in trouble, your brothers would save you. She released the wall, assumed the distress position, let herself become vulnerable. Jesse grabbed her in standard rescue carry, arms around her chest, supporting her weight. Textbook form. Then he pulled down instead of up. Mackenzie's world became underwater chaos. Bubbles, pressure, impossible weight of Pack dragging her deeper. Jesse's arms like iron bands crushing her ribs. She fought, elbowed his ribs. He grunted but held on. They sank deeper. 10 feet, 15 feet, 20 feet. Her lungs began to burn. Vision began to tunnel. This was not training. This was murder. She went limp, playing possum, hoping he would release her. He loosened his grip, just slightly, just enough. She drove her knee into his groin with every ounce of strength she had left. Jesse released her, curled around the impact, sank away into depths. Mackenzie kicked for surface. Pack tried to hold her down, tried to make her a statistic, tried to make her another dead Marine in a training accident. She broke surface, gasped air, tasted blood, tasted chlorine, tasted life. Brennan was right behind her. Got you, Sawyer. Loud enough for Barnes to hear. Loud enough to sound like rescue. Don't worry. His hands grabbed her from behind. Professional. Precise. Grip of someone trained in water rescue. Then he pushed her back under. Mackenzie went down fighting, kicking, clawing, trying to break free, but Brennan was bigger, stronger, and he had help. Elijah Stone entered the water. 3 men now, 3 against 1, coordinated, planned, executed with military precision. They held her down, 20 feet deep, 25 feet, 30 feet, packed like an anchor, hands like shackles, water like a grave. Mackenzie's lungs screamed, vision tunneled, body began involuntary convulsions that preceded drowning. She had 30 seconds of consciousness left, maybe less. Her father's face appeared in the dying light. Not judging now, just watching, waiting to see if his daughter would join him. I'm sorry, Dad. I wasn't strong enough. Then God spoke. His voice came through amplified speakers, carried the weight of absolute authority, cut through water and chaos in the fog of dying with perfect clarity. All personnel, cease activity immediately. Release Corporal Sawyer, now, Master-at-Arms. Secure Staff Sergeant Brennan, Corporal Stone, and Lance Corporal Carver. This is General Briggs. If anyone moves, they are under arrest. The hands released. Instantly, Automatically, the way Marines responded to general officers giving direct orders. Mackenzie floated up. Body moved without conscious thought. Survival instinct taking over. She broke surface, gasped, coughed, vomited water and blood and the taste of death. California's sun had never looked so bright. Air had never tasted so sweet. Sound of military police sirens in distance had never sounded so much like salvation. 300 yards away, General Marcus Briggs lowered his binoculars. Hand was still on his sidearm. Finger was still on radio transmit button. Face was a mask of barely controlled fury. Sergeant Major Kane stood beside him. Old Warrior's face was grim. You just destroyed 3 careers in 60 seconds. Good, Briggs replied. Turned from rail, began descending tower stairs, moved with purposeful stride of someone about to deliver judgment. Those 3 Marines forgot something fundamental, something sacred, something General Marcus Briggs learned in Vietnam, mud and blood, and carried with him for 40 years. You do not touch a brother's daughter. You do not break a promise to the dead. And you do not, under any circumstances, attempt murder and call it training. Not while Marcus Briggs still drew breath. He reached the bottom of tower, began the 300-yard walk to the pool. Behind him, Kane followed. 2 old warriors, Vietnam vets, men who'd seen enough evil to recognize it, men who'd done enough killing to know when it was necessary. At the pool, military police were pulling 3 men from water, all 3 restrained, all 3 shouting, protesting, claiming misunderstanding. Corporal Mackenzie Sawyer sat on pool deck, coughing, bleeding from her mouth where she bit her tongue, shaking from cold and shock and aftermath of adrenaline. But she was alive, because 1 man had been watching, because 1 man remembered a promise, because 1 man refused to let history repeat itself. General Briggs approached. Every Marine in area snapped to attention. General moved past them without acknowledgement, had eyes only for the woman sitting on deck. He knelt beside her. Corporal Sawyer, gently, are you injured? Mackenzie looked up at him, eyes gray like her father's, filled with shock and pain and something that might have been gratitude or might have been rage. I'll manage, sir. You nearly died. You're going to medical. That's an order. Who are you? Briggs stood, looked at 3 men in restraints, at Brennan, at Stone, at Carver, at 3 Marines who forgot what the uniform meant. Someone who owed your father a debt, quietly, and I just paid it. He turned to military police. Take those 3 to the brig, separate cells, no communication. They are charged with attempted murder. Sir, Brennan shouted, this is a misunderstanding. Briggs looked at him. Look was colder than Arctic ice, harder than diamonds. Look of a man who killed 87 enemy soldiers and would happily make it 90 if necessary. You are under arrest, Staff Sergeant. I suggest you remain silent. Turn back to Mackenzie. Medics were arriving. Rivera was at her side, supporting her, refusing to let her fall. Stay with her, Briggs told Rivera. Don't let her out of your sight. Yes, sir. Briggs walked away. Work here was not done. Investigations to launch, reports to file, careers to destroy. But the most important thing was already accomplished. Daniel Sawyer's daughter was alive. Promise was kept. Debt was paid. Behind him, California's sun blazed down on Camp Pendleton. On pool where murder was attempted and stopped. On 3 men who would spend the rest of their lives paying for 60 seconds of evil. And somewhere in California desert, in a cemetery where heroes were buried, Captain Daniel Sawyer rested easy. His daughter survived. His friend protected her. His sacrifice was not in vain. The story was not over. Investigation was just beginning. Justice would take time. Healing would take longer. But for now, in this moment, standing in California's sun with water dripping and life returning and future still uncertain, one thing was absolutely clear. The Corps took care of its own, eventually, imperfectly, with too much pain and too many failures along the way. But in the end, when it mattered most, the promise held. Marines did not abandon Marines, not on battlefield, and not in training pool at Camp Pendleton on a Tuesday morning in June when 3 men forgot what honor meant and 1 general remembered why promises to the dead were sacred. The ambulance doors closed on Corporal Mackenzie Sawyer with the finality of a coffin lid. She sat on the gurney, refusing to lie down. She would face what was coming upright. What was coming was the reckoning. Corporal Nathan Rivera sat beside her, his presence solid and reassuring like a good rifle. He had not left her side since General Briggs gave the order, would not leave until she was safe. That was what Marines did for each other when the system remembered to work. You okay? Stupid question, he knew it. She knew it, but someone had to say something. I'll manage. Not a lie this time. Not quite truth either, just the only answer a Marine could give when the alternative was admitting that 3 men she was supposed to trust had just tried to murder her. Her hands shook, not from cold, from adrenaline crash, from the body's delayed realization that it had just survived an execution, that 3 Marines had coordinated her death with military precision. The ambulance pulled away from the pool. Through the small window, Mackenzie watched military police load Staff Sergeant Colt Brennan into a separate vehicle. He was screaming, fighting his restraints, face purple with rage. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief. Just the hollow emptiness that comes after violence. The 1,000-yard stare that her father had carried home from Iraq. Captain Daniel Sawyer had looked like this after Fallujah. Distant, disconnected, living in his head where the ghosts lived. She was 8 years old and did not understand then. She understood now. The Naval Hospital at Camp Pendleton smelled like every military medical facility in history. Antiseptic and floor wax and the particular smell of young men with traumatic injuries trying not to show pain. Dr. Angela Howard was waiting, 42 years old, Navy commander, trauma surgeon who had done 3 tours in Afghanistan and seen everything the human body could survive, and everything it could not. She took one look at Mackenzie and started giving orders. Full respiratory panel, chest x-ray, blood oxygen saturation, CT scan if there's any indication of cerebral hypoxia, and photograph every bruise, every mark, every injury. This is attempted murder, and I want documentation that will hold up in court-martial. The exam took 2 hours. Dr. Howard was thorough, professional, and quietly furious in the way that competent women get when they see the system fail another woman. You have bruising consistent with restraint, not rescue. Your oxygen saturation dropped to 78%. Another 30 seconds and you would have suffered permanent brain damage. Another minute and you would be dead. She paused. Let that sink in. This was not a training accident, Corporal. This was attempted murder. And I will testify to that effect at any proceeding that requires my testimony. Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Howard studied her, seeing past the 1,000-yard stare to the woman underneath. You're going to have nightmares, panic attacks, probably some PTSD symptoms. That's normal after near-death experiences. I'm ordering you on medical leave for 1 week minimum. Mandatory psychological evaluation before return to duty. Ma'am, with respect, that was not a suggestion. That was an order. You nearly died today. Your body and mind need time to process that. Mackenzie wanted to argue, wanted to insist she was operational, wanted to get back to training before anyone could say she was weak or couldn't handle the pressure. But her hands were still shaking. Her lungs still burned. And some part of her, the part that was still 8 years old and watching her father come home broken from war, knew the doctor was right. Understood, ma'am. 2 hours after the attack, Colonel Patricia Simmons arrived at Camp Pendleton with a briefcase full of legal precedents and a reputation for ending careers. She was 50 years old, JAG officer with 25 years of service, 2 combat tours in Iraq as a legal advisor, 3 years as a defense attorney, 5 years as a prosecutor. She knew every angle, every loophole, every way that military justice could be manipulated, and she did not tolerate manipulation. Her temporary office overlooked the parade ground where Marines ran morning formations. She spread files across a conference table with methodical precision. Incident reports, medical documentation, video footage from 3 security cameras that had captured portions of the attack. She studied everything twice before calling her first witness. The investigation would take 72 hours. By the time it was done, 3 careers would be destroyed. 1 would be damaged beyond repair, and the Marine Corps would be forced to confront truths it had been avoiding for decades. But first, she needed to understand exactly what had happened and why. Private Eddie Wagner entered the conference room looking like he wanted to vomit. 20 years old, fresh from boot camp, baby-faced and nervous even under normal circumstances. Today he looked terrified. Sit down, Private. Colonel Simmons' voice was neutral, professional. This is not an interrogation. I'm gathering facts. Your cooperation will be noted. Your lack of cooperation will also be noted. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. Walk me through what you saw at the pool. Everything, not just what you think matters. The story came out in fragments. Eddie had been in the second group waiting his turn for the exercise. He saw Corporal Sawyer and Lance Corporal Carver go under during the rescue drill. Saw Staff Sergeant Brennan enter the water. Then things got confusing because everyone was shouting and he could not see clearly from his angle. But you saw General Briggs intervene. Yes, ma'am. He was up in the observation tower. Suddenly he was on the radio and MPs were everywhere. It happened so fast. Simmons made notes on her legal pad. Did you witness any interaction between Staff Sergeant Brennan and Corporal Sawyer prior to the pool exercise? Eddie hesitated, the kind of hesitation that said he knew something but was afraid to say it. Private Wagner, 3 Marines are facing court-martial for attempted murder. If you witnessed relevant events and failed to disclose them, you could face charges of obstruction. On the other hand, if you tell me what you know, you're simply doing your duty. Which would you prefer? The dam broke. Brennan didn't like her, ma'am. He was always making comments about Corporal Sawyer during drills, about how women didn't belong in infantry, about how she was just riding her father's legacy. Carver and Stone followed his lead like they always did. Eddie's voice got quieter, shame coloring his words. I saw them mess with her gear a couple times. Saw Carver do something to the obstacle course rope. But I didn't say anything because I was afraid they'd target me next. Did anyone else witness these incidents? Corporal Rivera. He tried to help Sawyer, but Brennan shut him down. And Staff Sergeant Reeves, she's the range officer. I heard her arguing with Captain Fletcher about Sawyer's situation a couple weeks back. She was angry that nothing was being done. Thank you, Private. You're dismissed. Send in Corporal Rivera on your way out. Rivera's testimony was more detailed and far more damning. He had documented incidents in his personal log, dated entries describing sabotage attempts and escalating harassment. He had reported concerns to Staff Sergeant Reeves 3 separate times, had even attempted to speak with Captain Fletcher directly. Fletcher told me that interfering with unit dynamics was inappropriate, that Sawyer needed to handle her own problems, that Marines who couldn't handle pressure didn't belong in infantry. In your professional opinion, Corporal, was this standard training friction or targeted harassment? Rivera met Simmons' eyes directly. Ma'am, I've been through 3 training cycles. I've seen people clash. I've seen personality conflicts. This was different. Brennan was running a campaign. He wanted Sawyer gone. And when she refused to quit, he escalated to violence. Why do you think he targeted her specifically? Because she's better than him at almost everything that matters in combat. Better shot, better tactical instincts, better under pressure. Brennan comes from a military family. His father's a 2-star general. His grandfather was a Marine Corps legend. He's never lived up to that legacy, never seen real combat despite 6 years in the Corps. Then Sawyer shows up, a dead hero's daughter, and immediately outperforms him. It made him look weak. You believe this was about ego? I believe this was about a man who couldn't handle being second best to a woman. Everything else follows from that. Staff Sergeant Diana Reeves corroborated Rivera's account, added her own observations, produced copies of every report she had filed with Captain Fletcher, every request for intervention that had been denied or ignored. Her testimony carried the weight of professional experience. She had seen this pattern before, at other bases, other training cycles, watched it play out with predictable tragedy. The system is designed to give commanders discretion in handling internal conflicts, she told Simmons. But discretion requires judgment, and Fletcher's judgment was compromised. By what? By the fact that his own daughter died the same way he was letting Sawyer die. By harassment that went unchecked until it was too late. Simmons looked up sharply. His daughter? Reeves told her about Sarah Fletcher, the harassment at Camp Lejeune, the suicide, the father who was deployed and told his daughter to handle it herself, to be tough, to prove she belonged. When Sarah Fletcher hung herself in the barracks, she was 19 years old and her father was 6,000 miles away fighting a war. He came home to bury his daughter and never forgave himself. Did you warn Sawyer that Fletcher wouldn't help her? Reeves's jaw tightened. I told her to document everything and be patient. I thought if we built a strong enough case, Fletcher would have to act. I was wrong. I underestimated how much commanders can look away from when it's convenient. That afternoon brought a different kind of witness. Lance Corporal Jesse Carver sat across from Colonel Simmons with his hands clenched in his lap, eyes red-rimmed from crying, voice shaking. He looked like someone standing on the edge of a cliff trying to decide whether to jump. Unlike Brennan, who had been screaming about injustice since his arrest, Jesse had been quiet, almost catatonic according to the MPs guarding him. I want to make a statement. The words came out rushed, desperate. I want to cooperate fully. I'll testify against Brennan and Stone. I'll tell you everything. Simmons studied him carefully. Remorse could be genuine or strategic. She needed to determine which this was. Why the change of heart, Private? Because I could have killed someone. Jesse's voice cracked. I was holding her underwater. I felt her fighting me. I knew she was drowning, and I kept holding her because Brennan said we had to teach her a lesson. What kind of person does that? What kind of Marine? Walk me through the planning. Whose idea was the pool attack? The story emerged into painful detail. Brennan had been planning something for days, getting increasingly frustrated as Sawyer refused to break. The pool had seemed perfect, easy to explain as an accident, hard to prove otherwise. Corporal Stone tampered with Sawyer's weighted pack, added extra plates to make her more vulnerable in the water. I was supposed to initiate the struggle during the rescue drill. Then Brennan would assist while Stone ensured no one interfered. We didn't think anyone would be watching that closely. Barnes was supposed to be focused on the other recruits. We thought we'd have time to make it look real. Like she panicked and pulled us all under. Jesse wiped at his eyes. But General Briggs was watching from the observation tower. We didn't know he was there. Didn't know anyone important was there. I keep thinking about how close we came. If the general hadn't seen us, Sawyer would be dead, and it would have been my fault. You understand that cooperation doesn't guarantee leniency. I don't want leniency. I want to make this right, or as right as it can be after what I did. Simmons made notes. Genuine remorse would not save him from a dishonorable discharge, but it might keep him out of military prison. Corporal Elijah Stone's interview was shorter and far less productive. He sat with arms crossed, expression defiant, answered every question with variations of "I don't recall" and "I was just following orders." When pressed about the weighted pack, he claimed he distributed equipment normally and had no knowledge of tampering. When asked about planning discussions, he insisted he had been present but not involved. "You're protecting Brennan," Simmons observed. "I'm exercising my right to avoid self-incrimination. That right exists. It also tells me everything I need to know about your character and your involvement." She closed her notepad. "You can maintain your silence, Corporal, but understand that Private Carver is cooperating fully. His testimony places you directly in the conspiracy. Your loyalty to Brennan is admirable in its own way. Misguided, but admirable. I hope it's worth the court-martial." Staff Sergeant Brennan refused to speak without a lawyer present. His right, but also extremely telling. Innocent Marines did not typically lawyer up before giving their version of events. His appointed defense counsel was a junior JAG captain named Marcus Webb, who looked like he had drawn the shortest straw in the office. Nobody wanted to defend an attempted murder case with video evidence and eyewitness testimony from a three-star general. While Simmons compiled her investigation, Mackenzie remained in medical observation. Dr. Howard released her after 3 days, but with restrictions. No strenuous physical activity, no swimming, daily check-ins with the base psychologist. That last requirement brought Mackenzie to Dr. Rebecca Walsh's office on Thursday afternoon. Walsh was 43 years old, clinical psychologist specializing in combat trauma and PTSD. 15 years counseling Marines who had seen and done things that haunted them. She had heard every story, every rationalization, every way that warriors tried to avoid dealing with the psychological wounds. She also knew that the ones who refused help were the ones who ended up eating their pistols in base housing at 3 in the morning. Her office was deliberately comfortable. Soft lighting, furniture that did not look institutional, a coffee maker that produced drinkable results, and no desk between her and her patients. Just 2 chairs facing each other like equals, having a conversation. Mackenzie sat in one chair with her spine rigid and her face showing nothing. The perfect picture of a Marine who did not need help. "I can handle this on my own," first words out of her mouth. "Just need to get back to training." Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. Walsh poured 2 cups of coffee, handed one to Mackenzie. "You experienced a violent assault. Your body and mind need time to process that. Ignoring trauma doesn't make you stronger. It just means you're carrying unprocessed weight that will manifest in other ways." "Like what?" "Hypervigilance, panic attacks, a difficulty trusting colleagues, anger management issues, substance abuse. Take your pick. I've worked with enough combat veterans to know that Marines resist acknowledging psychological wounds. But near drowning is traumatic regardless of whether it happened in combat or a training pool." Mackenzie stared into her coffee cup. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was supposed to be good enough that they'd give up, that they'd realize I belonged here and leave me alone." "You were good enough. That's why they attacked you. Excellence doesn't disarm bullies. It enrages them." Walsh leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about your father. The shift in topic caught Mackenzie off guard. What does he have to do with anything? You're carrying his legacy whether you want to or not. Everyone at this base knows who Daniel Sawyer was. That creates pressure beyond normal training challenges. I want to understand how that pressure affects you. Mackenzie talked about growing up on bases where everyone knew her father's name, about the way people looked at her after he died, some with pity, some with expectation, all of them seeing him when they should have been seeing her, about the letters she still carried, the impossible standard they represented. He told me to maintain my integrity when the system tried to break me down, but the system protected the people who tried to kill me. If General Briggs hadn't been watching, I'd be dead, and Brennan would still be training recruits. Her voice was quiet, bitter. That's not integrity. That's luck. General Briggs was watching because he chose to be there, because he cared enough about your father to check on his daughter's progress. That's not luck. That's the system working through individual choices. Sometimes those choices save lives. Mackenzie wanted to argue, but exhaustion won out. She had been fighting for so long, fighting to prove herself, fighting against Brennan's harassment, fighting for her life in that pool. She did not have energy left for fighting her own emotions. That evening, General Marcus Briggs requested her presence at his temporary office. She went reluctantly, still unsure how to process the revelation that this general had known her father, had been saved by him, had been tracking her career from afar like some military guardian angel. Briggs' office was spare and functional, walls decorated only with service flags and a single photograph of Marines in desert camouflage. Mackenzie recognized the image as somewhere in Iraq, though she could not pinpoint the location. "Sit, Corporal." Briggs gestured to a chair. "I wanted to update you on the investigation." He looked different in this setting, less like an avenging god and more like a man carrying the weight of hard decisions. "Colonel Simmons is extremely thorough. Her report will be devastating for Brennan and his co-conspirators. Private Carver is cooperating. Corporal Stone is stonewalling. Brennan is hiding behind his lawyer. The evidence is sufficient to proceed regardless." He paused. "How are you handling this?" "Still standing, sir. You don't have to be stoic with me, Mackenzie. I knew your father. I know what it costs to carry that kind of weight." Briggs stood, walked to the window, his back to her. "Daniel used to say he was fine too, ready for duty. He was lying most of the time, usually because he was dealing with something he thought he should handle alone." Mackenzie felt something crack in her chest. "Tell me about him, about Fallujah, about what really happened." Briggs was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. It was 2011. Second Battle of Fallujah was officially over, but the city was still a war zone. My platoon was conducting house-to-house searches in a residential sector that intel claimed was clear. Your father was my second in command, smart, cautious, always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. He turned to face her. We entered a building that looked abandoned. Standard clearing procedure. Nothing unusual. Then your father stopped, just froze in the middle of the room and held up his fist. What Briggs described next, Mackenzie had heard pieces of before, from official reports, from the citation that came with her father's Silver Star. But never with this level of detail, never from someone who had been there. He said something felt wrong. The dust patterns were off, the furniture arranged in a way that didn't make sense for civilian occupation. He was examining the floor when he spotted the pressure plate. Command wire IED, sophisticated enough that our sweep team had missed it. One wrong step and the entire building would have collapsed on us. Briggs' expression was distant, remembering. He ordered everyone back while he traced the wire to the detonator, found it in the basement, connected to enough explosives to level the block. He disarmed it manually because we couldn't call EOD without revealing our position to the insurgents watching the street. That's why he got the Silver Star. That's why he earned it. But that wasn't what saved my life. He returned to his chair. 3 days later, we got ambushed in a marketplace. RPG took out our lead vehicle. Small arms fire from multiple positions. Classic kill zone. I took shrapnel to the leg and went down in the open. Your father dragged me behind cover while rounds were impacting all around us. Then he held that position for 20 minutes, returning fire, coordinating our response until reinforcements arrived. Mackenzie felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. He never told us about any of this. Mom just got official notifications. We never knew details. That's how your father operated. He didn't talk about his actions because he was focused on the mission and his Marines. He didn't want glory. He wanted to do his job well. Briggs met her eyes. He would have seen himself in you, Mackenzie. Not because you're following in his footsteps, but because you maintained your integrity when everything was designed to break it. You didn't quit. You didn't compromise. You survived. With your help, with the help of someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Just like you'll be in the right place at the right time for someone else someday. That's how this works. We watch out for each other even when the official channels fail. The formal hearing was scheduled for 1 week after the incident. Simmons had completed her investigation with brutal efficiency, compiled testimony and evidence into a report that read like a prosecution closing argument. Brennan, Stone, and Carver would face a military tribunal to determine whether they would be court-martialed for attempted murder or face lesser charges. Captain Fletcher was facing his own reckoning. Simmons' report had documented his failures of leadership in exhaustive detail. Using his own words from Reeves' testimony to demonstrate dereliction of duty, he would not face criminal charges, but his career was effectively over. The hearing took place in a room designed to intimidate. High ceilings, formal seating, an elevated bench where 3 senior officers would sit in judgment. Mackenzie arrived early. Rivera accompanied her, appointed himself her unofficial bodyguard. General Briggs was already there, speaking quietly with Simmons, reviewing last-minute details. Brennan, Stone, and Carver sat at separate tables with their defense counsel. Brennan looked defiant, jaw set, eyes hard. Stone appeared resigned, like someone who had already accepted the outcome. Carver looked sick, face pale, hands trembling, despite his obvious attempts at composure. The tribunal filed in, 2 colonels and a brigadier general, all veterans with decades of experience adjudicating military justice. The senior colonel was named Andrews, gray hair, granite expression. He called the hearing to order. This tribunal convenes to hear evidence regarding charges of assault and attempted murder against Staff Sergeant Colt Brennan, Corporal Elijah Stone, and Private First Class Jesse Carver. All parties have been informed of their rights. Counsels, are your clients prepared to enter, please? Brennan's lawyer stood. Not guilty, sir. Stone's attorney echoed. Not guilty, sir. Carver's counsel hesitated, then said, my client wishes to enter a guilty plea and cooperate with these proceedings. A murmur ran through the spectators. Brennan's head snapped toward Carver, expression murderous. Carver kept his eyes fixed forward, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. Andrews nodded. Noted. Colonel Simmons, present your case. What followed was methodical destruction. Simmons walked the tribunal through her investigation with clinical precision. Video footage showed Brennan and Stone entering the water after Carver's rescue attempt had gone wrong. Medical evidence demonstrated severity of injuries consistent with assault rather than training accidents. Witness testimony from Eddy, Rivera, and Reeves established a pattern of harassment and planning. General Briggs' testimony carried particular weight. He described what he had observed through his binoculars. The way Carver had pulled Sawyer down instead of up. The way Brennan had positioned himself to prevent her from reaching safety. The deliberate coordination that spoke to premeditation rather than panic. In my 32 years of service, Briggs said, his voice carrying absolute conviction, I have never witnessed a more clear-cut case of attempted murder. These Marines planned and executed an attack on a fellow service member during a training exercise. They used the structure of that exercise to disguise their intent. If I hadn't been present, they would have succeeded and Corporal Sawyer would be dead. Brennan's defense tried to establish reasonable doubt. His lawyer argued that training exercises were inherently chaotic, that miscommunication could explain the incident, that his client's record should weigh against the accusations. It was a valiant effort, but it crumbled under the weight of evidence. Carver's testimony sealed the outcome. He walked the tribunal through the planning in excruciating detail, describing conversations where Brennan had outlined the attack and secured their cooperation. He admitted his own culpability without reservation, voice steady despite tears streaming down his face. I have no excuse for what I did. During cross-examination, I was weak. I valued Brennan's approval more than Corporal Sawyer's life. I will live with that choice for the rest of my life. All I can do now is tell the truth and accept the consequences. The tribunal recessed for deliberation. The wait was excruciating, 45 minutes that felt like hours. During the recess, something happened that would cement the case forever. A man in Marine Corps dress uniform entered the courthouse, 2 stars on his collar, chest full of medals, face like carved granite. Major General William Brennan, Colt Brennan's father. He moved through the hallway with the confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted. Found Colonel Simmons reviewing notes in a side office. Colonel Simmons, deep voice. Command authority, I'm William Brennan, Staff Sergeant Brennan's father. Simmons looked up, professional courtesy masking immediate suspicion. General Brennan, sir. I want to discuss my son's case. There's nothing to discuss, sir. The evidence is overwhelming. William Brennan closed the office door. The gesture was deliberate, intimidating. My son made an error in judgment, but destroying his career over a training incident seems excessive, don't you think? Your son attempted to murder a fellow Marine. That's not an error in judgment. Brennan's expression hardened. Words can be interpreted differently. Training is inherently dangerous. Misunderstandings happen. I'm sure we can find a more appropriate resolution. What kind of resolution? Reduction in rank, administrative separation, reassignment to a non-combat role, something that doesn't involve federal charges and public humiliation. Your son held a woman underwater until she nearly died. There's video evidence, witness testimony, a confession from his accomplice. William Brennan leaned forward. His voice dropped to something dangerous. I have connections, Colonel, at HQMC, at the Pentagon, in Congress. This case could quietly disappear. My son could accept non-judicial punishment. You could move on to cases that actually matter. And your career could benefit significantly from knowing when to show discretion. Simmons stood slowly. Her voice was ice. Are you attempting to bribe a military prosecutor, General Brennan? I'm suggesting pragmatism. My son has served honorably for 6 years. One incident shouldn't define his entire career, especially when the alleged victim suffered no permanent harm. She nearly died, but she didn't. And making an example of a decorated Marine over a training accident sends the wrong message to the Corps. Before Simmons could respond, another voice cut through the room like a blade. The only message this sends is that attempted murder has consequences. General Marcus Briggs stood in the doorway. He must have been passing by, must have heard enough. His face was carved from stone. His eyes were Arctic ice. William Brennan turned, surprise flickering across his features before he masked it with forced cordiality. Marcus, I didn't know you were involved in this case. I'm the one who stopped your son from committing murder. I'm the one who witnessed the entire attack. I'm the one who will make damn sure he spends the next 20 years in prison. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. My son made a mistake. Your son is a predator who targeted a woman because his ego couldn't handle being second best. And you're here trying to use your rank to protect him from consequences. That tells me everything I need to know about where he learned that behavior. William Brennan's face flushed red. You're out of line, Marcus. No, you are. This is a military justice proceeding. You have no authority here. And if I hear that you've attempted to influence this case again, I will personally ensure that your interference becomes part of the official record. Do you understand me? The two generals faced each other, both decorated warriors, both carrying decades of service, both absolutely committed to their positions. This will damage your career, Marcus. I have friends, people who owe me favors. You're making enemies you can't afford. Briggs took a step closer. His voice was barely above a whisper, but carried the weight of absolute conviction. I don't care. Your son tried to murder the daughter of a Marine who saved my life. Honor matters more than careers. Justice matters more than connections. And if you think your Pentagon friends scare me, you don't know me at all. You'd burn everything you've built for a girl you barely know. I'd burn it for what's right, something you forgot somewhere along the way. William Brennan stared at him for 10 long seconds, then turned and walked out without another word. Simmons exhaled slowly. Thank you, sir. Document everything he said. If he tries anything else, we'll add witness intimidation to the charges against his son. Briggs turned to leave, paused. Some fathers teach their sons about honor and integrity. Others teach them that consequences are for other people. William Brennan taught his son the wrong lesson. Now we're correcting it. The tribunal reconvened 20 minutes later. Andrews called the room to order. The three judges looked grim. Their decision had clearly not been difficult. This tribunal finds Staff Sergeant Colt Brennan guilty of assault with intent to commit murder, conspiracy, and conduct unbecoming a Marine. Sentence: dishonorable discharge, reduction in rank to E1, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, and 20 years confinement at the United States Disciplinary Barracks, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Recommendation for federal prosecution upon release. Brennan exploded from his chair. screaming obscenities about injustice, about how women were ruining the Corps, about how his father would destroy everyone involved. MPs restrained him, dragged him from the room still screaming. Corporal Elijah Stone, guilty of conspiracy and assault with intent to commit murder. Sentence: dishonorable discharge, reduction in rank, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, and 15 years confinement at USDB Fort Leavenworth. Stone accepted his verdict in silence, face expressionless. Private First Class Jesse Carver, guilty as charged. However, this tribunal acknowledges your cooperation and genuine remorse. Sentence: dishonorable discharge, 5 years confinement at USDB Fort Leavenworth. Recommendation for parole eligibility after 3 years with good behavior. Carver nodded, shoulders slumping with something that might have been relief or might have been despair. Andrews continued, Captain Gerald Fletcher will face separate administrative proceedings for dereliction of duty and failure to maintain proper command climate. Staff Sergeant Diana Reeves is commended for her attempts to address these issues through appropriate channels and will be promoted to gunnery sergeant effective immediately. The hearing concluded with procedural efficiency. MPs escorted all 3 convicted Marines from the room, their military careers ending not with honor, but with shame and federal prison sentences. Mackenzie remained seated, feeling strangely detached from the proceedings. Justice had been served. The system had worked. Eventually. But 3 careers were destroyed. Her own had been permanently marked by this incident, and she could not shake the feeling that none of this should have been necessary. General Briggs found her afterward in the hallway outside the hearing room. Walk with me, Corporal. They moved through the facility in silence until they reached the memorial wall, a long granite structure etched with names of Marines who died in service. Briggs stopped in front of a specific panel, his hand reaching out to trace letters carved into stone. Sawyer, Daniel J. Captain, USMC, Fallujah, Iraq, 2011. I come here whenever I visit Camp Pendleton to remind myself what courage actually looks like. To remember that leadership means protecting the people who can't protect themselves. He turned to Mackenzie. Your father saved my life. I couldn't save his, but I can make damn sure his daughter gets the career she deserves, free from the toxicity that nearly killed her. Mackenzie touched the carved letters of her father's name. What happens now? Now you heal. You finish your training with a different unit. You prove again that you belong here. And someday when you're the senior Marine in some situation, you remember what happened and you make sure it never happens to anyone else. Briggs' expression softened slightly. I'd like to remain involved in your career if you'll allow it. Not as special treatment, but as mentorship. Your father was my friend. I'd consider it an honor to help his daughter become the Marine he would have wanted her to be. I'd like that, sir. They stood together at the memorial wall as evening settled over the base. 2 Marines separated by rank and generation, but connected by shared grief and mutual respect. Somewhere in the brig, Brennan was learning what happened to predators when the system finally paid attention. Somewhere in administrative holding, Fletcher was contemplating how his careerism had destroyed his career. And somewhere in the California dusk, justice had been served, imperfect, delayed, but ultimately delivered. Mackenzie Sawyer had survived her trial by fire. Now she had to figure out how to move forward, carrying her father's legacy while forging her own path. With Briggs as her mentor and the weight of this experience as her teacher, she would become something neither victim nor hero. Simply a Marine who had learned that survival sometimes meant accepting help. That strength came in forms beyond physical capability. The hard part was over. The real work was just beginning. 6 weeks after 3 Marines tried to murder her in a training pool, Corporal Mackenzie Sawyer stood in front of a different barracks at a different base, holding transfer orders that felt like both salvation and surrender. Marine Corps Base Quantico, Virginia. 3,000 miles from Camp Pendleton and everything that had happened there, the Advanced Infantry School. A fresh start, or an escape, depending on how you looked at it. General Marcus Briggs had arranged it personally, framed it as an opportunity rather than running away. But Mackenzie understood the subtext. Sometimes healing required distance. The Virginia autumn air bit differently than California heat, sharp and clean in a way that made her lungs work harder, made her remember that she was alive, that 3 men had tried to take that from her and failed. The nightmares had started the second night after the attack, always the same, underwater, hands pulling her down, her father's face dissolving into foam, waking up gasping at 0300, covered in sweat, hard hammering like automatic weapons fire. Dr. Walsh said it was normal, said trauma rewired the brain, created hair trigger responses where rational thought used to live. Recovery meant teaching her nervous system that she was safe. But Mackenzie did not feel safe. She felt like a grenade with the pin pulled, waiting to explode at the first loud noise or unexpected touch. Major Susan Reynolds ran the advanced infantry school with the kind of stern efficiency that left no room for excuses or pity. She was 48 years old, 23 years in the Corps, 2 combat deployments, silver hair cut short, eyes that missed nothing. She had read the incident reports from Camp Pendleton. Everyone had by now. The attempted murder, the court-martial, the general who destroyed 3 careers in 60 seconds. Corporal Sawyer. Reynolds looked up from her desk when Mackenzie reported, "I requested you for this unit specifically. Not because I feel sorry for you, but because General Briggs says you're an exceptional Marine who got dealt a bad hand. I run a clean program here. You'll be evaluated on performance. Nothing else. That work for you?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. You're assigned to 3rd Platoon under Lieutenant Brian Mitchell. He's former reconnaissance, thinks women in combat roles are the best thing that's happened to the Corps in decades. You'll fit in fine if you can keep up." "Can you keep up?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then get your gear stowed and report for tomorrow's exercises. Welcome to Quantico." 3rd Platoon turned out to be different from anything Mackenzie had experienced at Pendleton. 8 men, 4 women, all of them experienced enough to have formed their own opinions about talent and work ethic. Lieutenant Mitchell was 34, lean like a distance runner, calm in the way that only men who had seen real combat could be calm. He introduced her to the platoon with minimal ceremony. "This is Corporal Sawyer transferring from Camp Pendleton. She qualified expert marksman and scored top 10% on her combat fitness test. Treat her like you treat anyone else who earned their place here." No mention of the incident, no sideways glances or whispered conversations, just professional acceptance based on documented performance. Mackenzie felt some of the tension she had been carrying since California began to loosen. Her bunkmate was a corporal named Sarah Jenkins, woman from Tennessee with a dry sense of humor and a pragmatic approach to military life. She was a logistics specialist cross-training for combat roles. "I snore sometimes, but you can throw a pillow at me if it gets bad." Jenkins helped Mackenzie unpack. "I keep irregular hours because I'm working on a degree through the online program. I don't care what happened at your last assignment unless it affects me directly, which I'm guessing it won't. We good?" "We're good." The training at Quantico was different from Pendleton, more focused on small unit tactics, less on endurance tests. Mitchell ran exercises that simulated actual combat scenarios, emphasized decision-making under pressure rather than pure physical capability. Mackenzie found herself working with fire teams, coordinating movements, learning to lead and follow in fluid situations where mission requirements shifted minute by minute. She excelled at marksmanship training, which surprised no one who had seen her scores. What did surprise people was her tactical creativity, her ability to assess terrain and devise approaches that minimize risk while maximizing effectiveness. During one urban warfare simulation, she identified a flanking route that allowed her team to neutralize opposition forces without direct confrontation, earned Mitchell's approval and her teammates' respect. "Sawyer has that instinct you can't teach," Mitchell told Reynolds after reviewing the exercise footage. Mackenzie was not supposed to hear the conversation, but sound carried in the operations center. "She anticipates threats before they materialize, sees tactical opportunities others miss. Her father had the same gift," Reynolds replied. "Could be genetic, could be excellent training. Either way, she's an asset to this program." General Briggs visited 3 weeks into her Quantico assignment, arrived without fanfare, requested a private meeting. They met in a conference room overlooking the training grounds, autumn leaves beginning their transformation from green to gold outside the windows. "How are you adjusting?" "Better than expected, sir. Major Reynolds runs a tight program. The platoon is solid. No issues? No residual problems from Camp Pendleton?" Mackenzie considered lying, then decided against it. Briggs had saved her life, earned honesty. "I have nightmares sometimes, panic responses when I'm near water. Dr. Walsh says it's normal. That trauma takes time to process, but it doesn't affect my performance during training." "Yet," Briggs said. "Trauma has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. Have you continued therapy here?" "Major Reynolds requires it. I see someone twice a week." "Good." Briggs leaned back in his chair, studying her. I want to talk about your career trajectory. You're on track to complete this program in 3 months. After that, you have options. You could request a combat deployment, continue advanced training, transition to an instructor role. What do you want? Mackenzie had been thinking about this question since arriving at Quantico. What did she want? Revenge was satisfied. Brennan and his accomplices were gone, their careers destroyed, their futures measured in years behind bars. Proving herself felt hollow after everything she had endured. I want to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to other women. Finally, the system failed at multiple levels. Captain Fletcher ignored warnings. The training structure enabled harassment. There were no accountability mechanisms until someone nearly died. That needs to change. Briggs smiled. The expression transformed his usually stern features. That's what I was hoping you'd say. The Commandant has ordered a comprehensive review of training protocols and harassment prevention across all installations. They're assembling a committee to develop new standards. I recommended you as an advisor. Sir, I'm just a corporal. I don't have the rank or experience to advise on policy. You have first-hand experience with systemic failure and the resilience to survive it. That's more valuable than rank. Briggs pulled a folder from his briefcase. This is voluntary. You'd serve as a subject matter expert alongside senior officers and civilian consultants. It would mean additional duties on top of your current training, and you'd be sharing your story repeatedly with people who need to understand what went wrong. Mackenzie accepted the folder, scanned the proposal inside: policy review, training standard development, implementation oversight. It was exactly the kind of bureaucratic work she had joined the Marines to avoid. But it was also meaningful in a way that pure combat training was not. I'll do it. I thought you might. First meeting is in 2 weeks at the Pentagon. I'll ensure your command approves the temporary duty assignment. Briggs stood, preparing to leave, then paused. Daniel would have recognized himself in you. Not just the shooting, the way you assess situations, the way you lead without demanding attention. That's his gift passing forward. The policy work proved more engaging than Mackenzie anticipated. The committee included officers from various commands, civilian experts on workplace harassment, military lawyers who understood the intersection of justice and military culture. Mackenzie's role was to provide ground truth perspective, what actually happened in training environments when oversight failed and toxic leadership went unchecked. She testified about her experience multiple times, each retelling slightly easier than the last as the story became less raw and more analytical. She described the progression from subtle harassment to life-threatening violence, the ways that Brennan had exploited training structures to mask his attacks, the institutional barriers that prevented effective intervention. The problem isn't just individual bad actors, she told the committee during one session. It's a culture that treats complaints as weakness and values unit cohesion over individual safety. Marines are trained to handle problems internally, which works when the problems are external threats. It fails catastrophically when the threat comes from within the unit. A colonel named Davidson, who chaired the committee, listened intently before asking what would have prevented the escalation in your case. Mandatory and intervention protocols when harassment is reported. Clear consequences for commanders who ignore warnings. Anonymous reporting mechanisms that bypass chain of command. Regular climate surveys that identify toxic units before violence occurs. Mackenzie had thought about this extensively during her therapy sessions. And cultural change that makes it clear that targeting fellow Marines is more dishonorable than admitting you need help. The committee's recommendations, published 3 months later, incorporated many of Mackenzie's suggestions. New training standards mandated harassment prevention education at all levels. Reporting procedures were streamlined and protected. Commander accountability was strengthened with career consequences for failing to maintain safe training environments. It would not fix everything. Systems were too complex for perfect solutions, but it was progress toward a corps that protected its members as vigorously as it prepared them for combat. Meanwhile, Mackenzie's training at Quantico continued. She qualified for advanced reconnaissance skills, learning fieldcraft and surveillance techniques that required patience and precision. She completed leadership courses that prepared her for eventual promotion to sergeant. She participated in joint exercises with other service branches, working alongside Army Rangers and Navy SEALs who treated her with the same professional respect they extended to any competent Marine. Lieutenant Mitchell became an informal mentor, offering guidance that complemented Briggs' strategic oversight. Mitchell had combat experience that Briggs' senior ranks sometimes obscured. He understood the ground-level reality of leadership under fire, the split-second decisions that determined whether people lived or died. The thing about leadership, Mitchell told her during a field exercise debrief, is that it's not about being the smartest or strongest person in the room. It's about creating conditions where your team can excel. You did that today when you delegated the breach to Jenkins instead of taking it yourself. You recognized she had better close-quarter skills and trusted her to execute. I was worried it would look like I was avoiding risk. Risk avoidance is putting your ego ahead of mission success. What you did was tactical intelligence. There's a difference. Good leaders know it. Spring arrived, bringing with it the approach of graduation from the advanced infantry school. Mackenzie had completed every requirement with distinction, her performance consistently placing her in the top tier of her cohort. Major Reynolds submitted her for meritorious promotion to sergeant, which would be effective upon graduation. Recognition of both her skills and her contributions to the policy reform work that was reshaping Marine training culture. The week before graduation, Briggs visited again. This time he brought something Mackenzie had not seen in years. A shadow box containing her father's medals and commendations, including the Silver Star he had earned in Fallujah. Her mother had kept them stored away after the funeral, unable to display reminders of what she had lost. "Your mother asked me to give you these." Briggs presented the box with the formality usually reserved for military ceremonies. "She said you've earned the right to carry your father's legacy forward, that you've proven you're not living in his shadow, but creating your own light." Mackenzie accepted the box with trembling hands, studying the medals she had only seen in photographs. The Silver Star gleamed despite years of storage, its ribbon faded but intact. Beside it sat her father's dog tags, the metal worn smooth from years of wear. "There's something else." Briggs produced a second, smaller box. "This medal was never formally presented to your family. The paperwork got lost during the drawdown from Iraq. I've spent years tracking it through channels." He opened the box. "It's your father's Navy Cross, posthumously awarded for the action where he died. He shielded 3 Marines from an IED blast. Knowing it would kill him, they survived because he didn't hesitate." The Navy Cross was the second highest military decoration, just below the Medal of Honor. Mackenzie had known her father died heroically, but she had not known the full details, had not known that his sacrifice had been recognized at this level. "The official ceremony will be at the Marine Corps Museum next month. Your mother will be there. I'd like you to attend as well, in uniform, so we can properly honor what your father did." "Thank you, sir," Mackenzie managed, her throat tight with emotion she had not expected. "For everything, for watching out for me, for making sure his sacrifice wasn't forgotten. Daniel Sawyer saved my life. The least I can do is ensure his daughter has the career he would have wanted for her." Graduation day arrived with pristine weather, clear skies, moderate temperatures, the kind of conditions that made military ceremonies feel ordained rather than scheduled. Mackenzie stood in formation with her platoon, dress blues immaculate, her bearing reflecting months of intensive training in the deeper transformation that came from facing mortality and choosing to continue forward. Major Reynolds presided over the ceremony. Her remarks focused on the cohort's accomplishments and the responsibilities that came with advanced infantry qualifications. "You are now qualified to lead Marines in the most challenging environments our nation faces," Reynolds' voice carried across the parade ground. "That qualification comes with obligation. You will be responsible for lives beyond your own. You will make decisions under pressure that determine whether your people come home. The training you have completed here has prepared you technically and tactically. How you apply that training will define your character as Marines and as leaders." The awards portion of the ceremony brought Mackenzie forward for her meritorious promotion. Reynolds pinned on her sergeant stripes while reading the citation. "Sergeant Mackenzie Sawyer has demonstrated exceptional performance across all training metrics while simultaneously contributing to institutional reform efforts that will improve safety and effectiveness throughout the Marine Corps. Her technical proficiency, tactical creativity, and commitment to excellence exemplify the highest standards of Marine leadership. She is promoted to the rank of sergeant with all the rights and responsibilities that rank entails." Applause rippled through the gathered crowd. Mackenzie saluted, crisp and precise, then returned to formation. Her mother had flown in from California, looking older than Mackenzie remembered, but also lighter, as if some burden had been lifted. Ellen Sawyer embraced her daughter with fierce intensity after the ceremony ended. "I was so angry at you for joining. tears streaming down her face, angry that you'd chosen a path that took your father from us. But you've honored his memory in ways I couldn't have imagined. Daniel would see himself in your strength, in your integrity. I'm sorry I scared you, Mom. Sorry about Camp Pendleton and everything that happened there. You survived. That's what matters. You survived, and you're making things better. Ellen pulled back, studying her daughter's face. You look different, older, stronger, like you've lived through things that age you in ways that have nothing to do with time. I have, but I'm okay. I really am okay. Briggs approached after giving them time together, introducing himself to Ellen with courteous formality. Mrs. Sawyer, I'm Marcus Briggs. I served with your husband in Iraq. Ellen's eyes widened with recognition. The general he saved, he wrote about you in his letters. You were planning to leave the service, but he convinced you to stay. He did. He said that leaders who cared about their Marines were too valuable to lose to civilian life. It's advice I've tried to honor throughout my career, including watching out for his daughter when she needed it most. Thank you, Ellen said simply, for being there when I couldn't be, for making sure she had someone looking out for her. 3 months later, Sergeant Mackenzie Sawyer reported to Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, assigned as a squad leader in an infantry battalion preparing for deployment. Her Marines were younger than her, most of them fresh from boot camp and School of Infantry, eager and nervous in equal measure. She saw herself in their faces, the determination to prove themselves, the fear of failure, the weight of expectations, both internal and external. She trained them hard but fairly, emphasizing teamwork over individual glory and mission accomplishment over personal recognition. She shared her own experiences when relevant, including edited versions of what had happened at Camp Pendleton, not for sympathy but as teaching moments about recognizing toxic behavior and the importance of speaking up when something felt wrong. The hardest thing about being a Marine isn't the physical challenge or the tactical complexity, she told her squad during a field exercise debrief. It's maintaining your integrity when pressure builds to compromise it. You're going to face situations where the easy choice conflicts with the right choice. Character is what you do in those moments. Private Danny Lucas raised his hand. Kid from Ohio with more enthusiasm than polish. What if the right choice gets you in trouble, Sergeant? Then you accept the consequences and trust that eventually the system will recognize you did the right thing. It doesn't always happen immediately. Sometimes it takes someone else noticing and forcing accountability. But integrity isn't about avoiding consequences. It's about living with yourself after the smoke clears. The deployment orders came 6 months into her assignment. The battalion would spend 8 months in the Middle East conducting security operations and training partner forces. It was Mackenzie's first combat deployment, the culmination of everything she had worked towards since enlisting. The night before they shipped out, Briggs called her cell phone, a personal number she had only used twice before, both times in emergencies. I wanted to wish you good luck and remind you that leadership in combat is different from leadership in training. The consequences are immediate and permanent. Trust your instincts. Take care of your people. Come home alive. I will, sir, and thank you for everything you've done for me. Thank your father. He's the one who set all this in motion by being the kind of Marine worth saving. I'm just paying forward the debt. The deployment was exactly as challenging as Mackenzie anticipated. Long days of monotonous patrol work punctuated by moments of terror when threats materialized from civilian environments. She led her squad through ambushes and IED threats, made split-second decisions that kept people alive, demonstrated the tactical creativity that had first emerged during training simulations. 3 months into the deployment, her squad was conducting security for a humanitarian convoy when they encountered an improvised explosive device positioned to destroy the lead vehicle. Mackenzie spotted the disturbance in the road surface, the same kind of pattern recognition that had saved Briggs and his platoon in Fallujah when her father noticed something wrong. She halted the convoy, called for explosive ordnance disposal, evacuated civilians from the blast radius while her squad established a security perimeter. The EOD team confirmed a sophisticated IED, powerful enough to have killed everyone in the lead vehicle. Her observation had saved at least 8 lives, possibly more if the blast had triggered a secondary ambush. The commendation that followed mentioned her tactical awareness and decisive leadership. It did not mention her father or the genetic lottery that might have given her his instincts. It did not need to. She had earned this recognition through her own actions, her own choices, her own willingness to stay alert when exhaustion tempted complacency. When the deployment ended and the battalion returned to Camp Lejeune, Mackenzie had a Silver Star recommendation pending and a reputation as a squad leader who brought her people home alive. She had also gained something less tangible but equally valuable: confidence in her own judgment, independent of her father's legacy or Briggs's mentorship. She was a good Marine because she had chosen to be good, worked to develop her skills, never compromised her integrity even when the system tried to break her. The Navy Cross ceremony for her father took place at the Marine Corps Museum on a crisp November afternoon, 2 years after the incident at Camp Pendleton. Mackenzie attended in dress blues, her own Silver Star now among her ribbons, her sergeant stripes gleaming on pressed fabric. Her mother sat in the front row, tissues clutched in one hand and a photograph of her husband in the other. Briggs presided over the ceremony. His remarks focused on Daniel Sawyer's character and sacrifice, rather than the tactical details of how he had died. Captain Sawyer understood that being a Marine meant something beyond personal survival or individual achievement. Briggs's voice carried to the assembled crowd of Marines, veterans, and family members. It meant protecting the people beside you, even at cost to yourself. On a dusty street in Fallujah, he made the choice to shield his Marines from an explosion, knowing the choice would kill him. 3 Marines walked away from that street because he didn't hesitate. Briggs paused. Let the weight of those words settle. I walked away from an earlier incident because he saved my life months before. The ripples of his sacrifice continue to spread outward, touching lives he never met, influencing outcomes he couldn't have predicted. Mackenzie received the medal on her father's behalf, accepting the award case from the Commandant of the Marine Corps while her mother watched through tears. The Navy Cross was beautiful in its simplicity, a bronze cross with an eagle and anchor suspended from a blue and white ribbon. It represented the second highest military honor and recognized extraordinary heroism in the face of enemy action. After the ceremony, after the reception and the photographs and the formal congratulations, Mackenzie visited the museum's memorial wall, where her father's name appeared among thousands of others who had given their lives in service. She traced the carved letters the same way Briggs had traced them years ago, feeling the connection between past and present, sacrifice and legacy. "I made it, Dad," she whispered. "Through everything they threw at me, I made it, and I'm making things better like you tried to do." No answer came. The dead do not speak except through the memories and influences they leave behind. But Mackenzie felt something settle inside her, a peace that had eluded her through all the struggle and trauma and hard-won victories. She was her own Marine, carrying her father's legacy but not defined by it, creating her own story while honoring his sacrifice. Briggs joined her at the wall, his presence comfortable rather than intrusive. He'd see himself in you, quietly, not just in what you've accomplished, but in the choices you made to get here. "I couldn't have done it without your help. You'd have found a way. You're too stubborn to give up and too talented to fail permanently. I just helped smooth some rough patches." Briggs paused. "I'm retiring next year. 35 years is enough. But before I go, I want to make sure the programs we developed after Camp Pendleton are institutionalized properly. I'd like you to be part of that process, working with the next generation of leaders to ensure the changes we fought for don't get rolled back once attention moves elsewhere." "I'd be honored, sir." "Good, because the Corps needs Marines like you, people who've lived through systemic failure and came out the other side committed to fixing it. That's rarer than combat heroism and sometimes more valuable." They stood together in companionable silence, 2 Marines separated by generation and experience, but united by shared commitment to an institution larger than individual ambition. 5 years after the incident at Camp Pendleton, Staff Sergeant Mackenzie Sawyer stood in front of a new group of recruits at a reformed training facility where harassment prevention was built into every aspect of the program. She had been selected as an instructor specifically because of her experience, both her demonstrated tactical skills and her firsthand knowledge of how systems failed when leadership did not prioritize Marine welfare. "You're here to become infantry Marines," she told the assembled recruits, their faces reflecting the same nervous determination she had carried to Camp Pendleton a lifetime ago. "That means learning to shoot, move, and communicate effectively under pressure. It also means learning to recognize when someone in your unit needs help and being courageous enough to provide it. We don't abandon Marines on the battlefield. We also don't abandon them in training when someone's making their life hell." She saw understanding in some faces, confusion in others. They would learn. The good ones always did. After the formation dismissed, Mackenzie returned to her office. A small space with a window overlooking the training grounds and walls decorated with commendations that told the story of a career built on persistence rather than natural advantage. Her father's Navy Cross sat on her desk in its presentation case, a reminder of sacrifice and legacy. Beside it, a photograph showed her with Briggs at the museum ceremony. Two Marines honoring a third who died so others could live. Her phone buzzed with a text from Corporal Nathan Rivera, who had also transitioned to an instructor role at a different installation. Heard you tore apart a colonel who tried to dismiss a harassment complaint. Well done. Systems working better because of people like you. Mackenzie smiled and typed a response. System works when good people force it to. That's all of us, not just me. She meant it. Change did not come from single heroes or isolated interventions. It came from sustained effort by people committed to improvement despite obstacles and setbacks. It came from Marines who refused to accept toxicity as inevitable and who built something better through daily choices that prioritize people over politics. The sun was setting outside her window, casting golden light across the parade ground where recruits were running evening drills. Mackenzie watched them move through exercises that had been redesigned to emphasize teamwork over hierarchy, skill development over arbitrary physical challenges. The reforms were not perfect. Systems never were, but they represented progress toward a corps that protected its people as vigorously as it prepared them for combat. Her cell phone rang. Briggs calling from retirement to check in the way he did every few months. How's the new assignment treating you? Well, sir, the recruits are sharp, command is supportive, making a difference one Marine at a time. Your mother called me last week, said you're considering a commission. Applying for officer candidate school. I am. Figured I can have more impact on policy and culture as an officer than as a staff sergeant. You'll make an excellent officer. Just remember, rank gives you authority, but leadership comes from character. Never lose sight of that. I won't, sir. You taught me better than that. After the call ended, Mackenzie sat in her office as darkness fell outside, thinking about trajectories and transformation, about the distance between the corporal who had nearly drowned in a training pool and the staff sergeant who now taught others to survive and thrive in an imperfect system. The journey had not been easy. It had broken parts of her that she was still rebuilding, but it had also revealed strength she had not known she possessed and purpose that transcended personal ambition. She thought about her father, wondering what advice he would give if he could see her now. Probably something simple and direct, the kind of wisdom that seemed obvious only in retrospect. She thought about the Marines who had come before her, generations of warriors who had faced their own challenges and fought their own battles against systems that sometimes failed them. They had persisted anyway, creating incremental change that accumulated over decades into genuine transformation. She thought about the Marines who would come after her, the ones who would benefit from the policies she had helped develop, who would train in environments made safer by lessons learned from her near-death experience, who would lead with the understanding that protecting your people was as important as completing the mission. And she thought about herself, not as Daniel Sawyer's daughter or Briggs's protege, or even as the Marine who survived Brennan's attempt to kill her, but as Staff Sergeant Mackenzie Sawyer, a woman who had chosen to serve, who had faced death and chosen to continue, who had transformed pain into purpose and trauma into reform. She sat in the comfortable darkness at peace with her choices and ready for whatever came next. Because that is what Marines do. They face the uncertain future with courage born from discipline and sacrifice, carrying forward the legacy of those who came before while forging their own paths through whatever obstacles arise. Outside, the training grounds were silent, waiting for tomorrow's challenges. Inside, a staff sergeant held the memory of her father's sacrifice and the reality of her own survival. Grateful for both, determined to honor them through a life of service that would ripple forward into a future she could not predict, but could help shape through daily dedication to being the kind of Marine who made a difference. And as Mackenzie Sawyer finally stood and left her office, she carried with her the hard-earned knowledge that survival was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of everything that came after. Daniel Sawyer had died protecting 3 Marines in Fallujah. Marcus Briggs had spent 14 years honoring that sacrifice by protecting Daniel's daughter. And now Mackenzie Sawyer would spend the rest of her career protecting the Marines who came after her. The circle was complete, the debt was paid, the legacy continued. End of part 3. The end.